Dear students, today I am going to discuss the topic Chartism or the Chartist movement. The Chartist movement was a movement which advocated parliamentary reforms in England. In the beginning of 19th century, England already undertook parliamentary reforms, but it was not extended to all citizens. The Chartist movement was an attempt to emphasize on more parliamentary reforms. The Chartist movement lasted from 1837 to 1848. As a result of the agrarian and industrial revolution in England, there was lot of discontentment in the country. The poor people were suffering a lot and their wages were low and the prices had been kept in high in the interest of the landed aristocracy. The Reform Act of 1832, it was a Reform Act introduced in 1832. The Reform Bill of 1832 was not a democratic measure, but it made the House of Commons a truly representative body. It enfranchised the upper middle class. The number of voters, particularly in the boroughs, was considerably increased, but the labourers of England had no votes or had the poorer middle class. Even then, no, the laborers, neither the laborers nor the poorer middle class had voting rights in England. Even when, even then, only about one individual in 40 had the vote. The measure, therefore, though regarded as final by the Whig ministry, was not regarded so by the vast majority, who were still disfranchised. No further reforms were introduced till 1867, but during the whole intervening period, there was a demand for introduction of reforms. The passing of the Reform Act of 1832 added to the discontentment of the workers. In passing of the Reform Act of 1832, um, mm, eh, in passing of the Reform Act of 1832, both the workers and the middle class they worked hand in hand and contributed greatly by undergoing all forms of hardships. But unfortunately, when the Reform Act was passed, it excluded the working class from all political power. The workers started agitating for further reform of the parliamentary system. The discontented artisans and laborers formed themselves into league, and their official organ was the Northern Star. Their important leaders were Lovett, Atwood, Feargus O'Connor, etc. Under the leadership of Lovett and Feargus O'Connor, they drew up a program in which they put forward their demands. This came to be known as the People's Charter or Program, a petition to Parliament drawn in 1838. It contains the demands of the Chartist. Now, what were the demands of the Chartist? The demands of the Chartist were universal manhood suffrage, vote by secret ballot, payment of members of parliament, then annual parliaments, equal electoral districts, and abolition of property qualifications for members of parliament. It is to be noted that there were two groups of Chartists. One group believed in moral force, and the other believed in physical force. To begin with, the Chartists who believed in moral force had the upper hand in the beginning. But however, when peaceful agitation produced absolutely no effect on the government, those Chartists who believed in physical force came to have the upper hand. The Chartist movement had three centers, and these three centers were London, Birmingham, and Leeds. Each city reflected different aims of the Chartist movement. In 1836, the London Workingmen's Association was founded, and its object was to work for political reform by means of education and peaceful agitation. Its leader, William Lovett, represented the group of the Chartists who believed in moral force to achieve their objective. Although Chartist who believed in although he was imprisoned for his activities, he refused to consider the use of physical force. The advocates of physical force set up in 1837 the London Democratic Association. In the case of Birmingham, the Birmingham Political Union was revived. It was controlled by a middle class group headed by a local banker called Thomas Atwood. Atwood was interested in currency reform, which affected the people immensely. However, the movement became radical and Atwood could not continue as a leader. At Leeds, Fergus O'Connor established his newspaper, the Northern Star, from the city. He possessed considerable power of oratory and brought life to the movement. In 1839, the Chartists presented a petition to Parliament which was rejected. After that, an attempt was made at revolution at Newport, but that movement also failed as the ringleaders were transported for life. In 1842, a general strike was proclaimed. Peel's government arrested several hundred Chartists and trade union leaders. 500 of them were imprisoned, and this action really broke up Chartism. In 1848, when revolutions broke out in France and then in Europe, the Chartist leaders also tried to create a revolutionary atmosphere in England. Fergus O'Connor decided to organize a huge demonstration. He decided to draw up another petition with signature of 5 million people. But when the petition was presented in the parliament, it was found to have less than 2 million signatures. The government rejected the petition and the movement was ruthlessly suppressed by soldiers under the command of Duke of Wellington. The Chartist agitation finally died out initially because of lack of cohesion and also because of the growing prosperity of the country because of adoption of free trade. Uh, Despite its ultimately the Chartist movement came to an end, but despite its insignificant achievements during the time of movement, the Chartist movement did bring about changes in the future course of England's history. It is to be noted that although the Chartist movement failed, most of its demands, except the demand for annual parliament, were met later on. Other demands of the Chartists were fulfilled when not only universal manhood suffrage but universal adult suffrage has been established in England by the Acts of 1867, 1884, 1918, and 1928. The Ballot Act of 1872 established secret voting by ballot. Property qualifications for members of parliament were abolished in 1885. Equal electoral districts were established by the Act of 1885. The Parliament Act of 1911 provided for the payment of members of parliament. It cannot be denied that the Chartist movement had many indirect results. The literature of the period tried to depict the sufferings of the poor people. Ultimately, action was taken to improve their conditions. The administration of poor laws was improved. The corn laws were repealed to give cheaper food to the people. Factory acts were passed to improve the lot of those who were working in the factories. The Chartist movement influenced the thought of contemporary writers. It seems that some of the tremendous impetus of England toward democracy was derived from this movement of the Chartists. Thus, the Chartist movement was its aims were to establish more um, parliamentary democracy in England. Although initially during the time of the movement it was unsuccessful, but later on the demands of the whatever demands were made by the Chartist activists were in the long run these demands were fulfilled in England. And in the long run, so it can be said that initially, even though it was unsuccessful, but later on, when these demands were met with, so it turned out to be a successful movement in England. And it had a long role, it had a important role in the establishment of parliamentary democracy in England.